I always thought my life was predictable. Not perfect, but solid, built on a foundation of 12 years of marriage, daily routines, and unspoken trust. My name is David Holloway, and until a few weeks ago, I believed I had everything a man could ask for: a loving wife, a steady job, and the quiet comfort of a life that, while not thrilling, was at least stable. My wife, Emily, had always been the more outgoing one between us. She worked in marketing, a job that required her to attend networking events, business dinners, and occasional weekend retreats. I never questioned it. She was good at what she did, and I like to think that my support allowed her to thrive. Meanwhile, I worked as an architect, spending my days drafting blueprints and supervising construction projects. I liked my job. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me satisfaction, something tangible to show for my work. Our relationship had settled into a comfortable rhythm over the years. Mornings were spent sipping coffee in relative silence, both of us scrolling through our phones. Evenings involved quick dinners, sometimes together, sometimes apart, depending on her schedule. It wasn't the fiery romance of our early years, but it worked. Or so I thought. Looking back, I should have noticed the small things: the way she started dressing up more often for casual drinks with her colleagues, how she suddenly became protective of her phone, the late-night messages she'd swipe away before I could see them. But I chalked it up to stress. People changed, work got demanding, and after so many years, I figured we had moved past the need to constantly check in on each other. Then there was the call. It happened one evening when Emily was supposedly at a client dinner. I was home alone, flipping through Netflix, when our landline rang. We rarely used it, mostly telemarketers and the occasional call from our parents, so I hesitated before picking up. Hello? Silence. Then, a soft breath. And then the line went dead. I frowned but didn't think much of it. Probably a wrong number. But when it happened again 2 nights later, my gut twisted. Something was off. It wasn't just the calls. That same week, I noticed Emily being unusually distant. She would come home late, peck me on the cheek absent-mindedly, and disappear into the shower. The warmth in her eyes, the effortless affection she used to show, felt forced. Manufactured. Like she was going through the motions of being my wife, but her mind was somewhere else. The real moment that sent a chill down my spine came a few days later. I was in the laundry room, mindlessly folding clothes, when I picked up a blouse of hers and a faint scent hit me, one that didn't belong to our home. It wasn't her usual perfume. It was different. Masculine. I held the fabric to my nose, inhaling slowly, my mind racing. Maybe it was from work. Maybe she had hugged a coworker. Maybe I was just being paranoid. But a sinking feeling had settled into my chest, one I couldn't ignore. That night, as I lay in bed next to Emily, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing, I realized something had changed. I wasn't sure what, not yet. But something in our marriage, the foundation I had trusted so completely, was starting to crack. And I had no idea what was waiting for me on the other side. Strange changes. The days that followed felt normal, at least on the surface. Emily still left for work at the usual time, still kissed me goodbye at the door. I still made my coffee, went to work, and came home to a quiet house. But there were little things I couldn't ignore. She had become obsessed with her phone. Not in the way people scroll through social media out of habit, but deliberately. She'd pick it up, read something, smile slightly, then lock the screen and place it face down. Whenever I walked into a room, she'd tilt the phone away or close out of whatever she was doing. Then there were the nights out. Emily had always attended work events, but now they were more frequent. She started dressing up more: heels, lipstick, the little black dress she hadn't worn in years. Another work dinner? I asked one evening, watching as she adjusted her necklace in the mirror. Yeah, just a casual thing. Some new clients. You're dressed a little fancy for casual. She smiled at me through the mirror, her expression unreadable. I just like feeling good about myself. Is that a problem? I hesitated. No, of course not. She kissed me on the cheek and left. I sat on the couch for a while, feeling something I hadn't felt in years: doubt. The next morning, I found a receipt on the kitchen counter. It was from a restaurant across town, not one we usually went to. A place that was expensive, romantic. A date spot. The receipt was for 2 people. When she came into the kitchen, I casually picked it up. "You went to Le Jardin last night?" I asked. She barely glanced at it. "Yeah, the dinner ran late, so we decided to eat somewhere nicer." "We." I wanted to ask who, but something in her tone warned me not to push. "Must have been nice," I said, watching her. "It was fine," she replied, too quickly. I let it go, but the feeling stayed with me. The moment that changed everything. The next major red flag came the following weekend. Emily was supposed to be home Saturday morning, but she left unexpectedly, saying she had to meet a friend. Hours passed. I texted her. No reply. I called. Straight to voicemail. By the time the sun began to set, I had convinced myself I was being irrational. But just as I was about to give up, my phone buzzed. "Emily, sorry, my phone died. I was at coffee with Sarah. Be home soon." It seemed harmless. Normal, even. But then I noticed something. Emily's laptop was open on the counter. The screen had gone dark, but when I touched the trackpad, it lit up. There, in plain view, was an email. A hotel confirmation. 1 room. 2 guests. Booked for last night. Emily hadn't been at a work dinner. She hadn't been at coffee. She had been at a hotel. My chest tightened. My hands clenched into fists. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. She wouldn't. She couldn't. But the evidence was right in front of me. A storm was coming. And I was about to be caught right in the middle of it. I stared at the screen, my mind refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. A hotel reservation. 1 room. 2 guests. The booking was for the previous night, the same night Emily had told me she was at a work dinner. My hands were clammy as I hovered over the mousepad. I clicked on the email, heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. The reservation was under her name, confirmed at the Sterling Hotel, a place I knew all too well. It was a boutique hotel downtown, designed for intimacy. It wasn't where you stayed for a business meeting. It was where you went to hide, to be discreet. The confirmation showed the check-in time, 8:45 p.m. Checkout was 10:30 a.m. I clenched my jaw. She had left the house in her little black dress around 7:30 p.m. I had kissed her goodbye. Told her to have a good time. I felt like a fool. Denial is a hell of a drug. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe she booked it for a friend. Maybe there was an explanation. But deep down, I already knew the truth. And once you see the cracks in something, you can't unsee them. The search for proof. I needed more. The hotel confirmation wasn't enough, I had to be sure. Emily wasn't home yet. She had texted me that she was grabbing coffee with Sarah, her best friend. I could have called Sarah to check, but I didn't want to tip Emily off. Not yet. Instead, I turned to something she never expected me to check, her location history. Emily wasn't the most tech-savvy person. She knew how to use her phone, but she didn't think about things like Google Timeline, the feature that tracked everywhere she went. I opened the Google Maps app on her laptop, clicked her profile, and checked her activity. There it was. Last night, the Sterling Hotel. She had arrived at 8:47 p.m. and left at 10:36 a.m. My stomach twisted. I scrolled back through previous days. 3 weeks ago, the Sterling Hotel. Last month, the Sterling Hotel. It wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a pattern. I swallowed hard. My fingers tightened into fists as I stared at the screen. I felt like I was floating outside my own body, watching my life collapse in real time. Breaking the illusion. I closed the laptop, breathing heavily. Emily walked in 10 minutes later, still dressed in her casual outfit, holding a half-empty coffee cup like everything was normal. "Hey," she said with a small smile. "What have you been up to?" I forced myself to breathe. I couldn't confront her now. Not without a plan. "Not much," I lied, my voice steady. "Just catching up on some work." She moved past me, tossing her purse onto the counter. I watched her carefully. Every movement. Every glance. I had never studied her this closely before. I had never needed to. She seemed at ease. There was no guilt in her expression. No nervousness. How long had she been doing this? How many nights had I kissed her goodbye while she walked out the door to another man? I needed more evidence. Hard evidence. So, I made a decision. I was going to follow her. The shadow. Over the next week, I played dumb. I didn't ask questions. I didn't push. I acted like the same trusting husband she had always known. But when she went out at night, I wasn't sitting at home anymore. I was watching. The first night she went out with coworkers, I waited 10 minutes after she left, then grabbed my keys and followed. She drove straight to a bar downtown, not an office dinner spot, but a dimly lit lounge. I parked across the street and watched her from my car. She was waiting for someone. At exactly 9:15 p.m., a man arrived. Tall. Athletic build. Dressed well. He greeted her with a kiss on the cheek. They sat close. Too close. They laughed. She touched his arm. He leaned in. I clenched my fists so hard my knuckles turned white. I took out my phone and started recording. The evidence. I followed her for 3 nights. 3 different locations. 3 different encounters. It was him every time. They weren't just flirting. They were affectionate. Comfortable. Like they had been together for a long time. On the 4th night, I watched them walk into the Sterling Hotel together. I filmed them checking in. I filmed them holding hands as they entered the elevator. That was it. That was my proof. I drove home that night feeling hollow. I thought catching her would bring me some kind of satisfaction. Some clarity. Instead, I felt dead inside. 12 years. Gone. Just like that. The name. The next morning, I did something I never thought I'd have to do. I hired a private investigator. Not because I needed more proof, I had enough. But because I wanted to know who the hell this guy was. By that evening, I had my answer. His name was Mark Thompson. Married. 2 kids. Works in finance. And worst of all? Emily had been seeing him for almost a year. A year. While I planned vacations. While I celebrated our anniversary. While I told her I loved her. She had been sleeping with this man for a year. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was too numb for that. But the storm was coming. And when it hit, I was going to make sure she never forgot it. The house felt colder that night. I sat at the dining table, staring at my laptop screen, the evidence open in front of me, video clips, screenshots, and even the investigator's report that confirmed everything. Emily Holloway has been engaged in an extramarital affair with Mark Thompson for approximately 1 year. The words burned into my skull. I could hear the faint sound of the shower running upstairs. She was home. Washing away the scent of another man. I took a slow breath. This was it. I had played dumb for long enough. The confrontation was coming, and I wasn't sure how it would end. The final straw. She came down the stairs wrapped in a towel, her wet hair slicked back, looking as relaxed as ever. "Hey," she said casually, opening the fridge. "You want some tea?" I studied her. I wanted to see if she looked guilty. If she looked nervous. She didn't. I had spent weeks watching her lie to my face, and not once had she hesitated. Emily had no idea I knew everything. I closed my laptop and exhaled. "No," I said, my voice cold. She frowned. "You okay?" That was the moment I decided to shatter her illusion. I leaned back, arms crossed, and said it. "How long have you been fucking Mark Thompson?" She froze. The air in the room shifted in an instant. Her entire body went still. The color drained from her face. The fridge door hung open, the carton of milk still in her hand. Then, finally, she moved, slowly closing the fridge, setting the milk down on the counter. "Excuse me," she said, her voice quiet. Controlled. "You heard me." I kept my tone flat, staring her down. "I know everything, Emily. I know about the hotel. I know about the texts. I know about the year you've spent sneaking around behind my back." She didn't even blink. For a moment, I saw something in her eyes. Not guilt. Not remorse. It was fear. Not because she regretted what she had done, but because she had been caught. "David," she finally said, taking a step toward me, hands slightly raised. "Whatever you think you know, it's not." "Don't." I cut her off. "Don't insult me by lying right now." She swallowed. I reached to the laptop, turned it toward her, and pressed play. The video was grainy but clear, her and Mark checking into the Sterling Hotel together, holding hands as they stepped into the elevator. Her breath hitched. Her eyes darted to me, and for the first time, I saw true panic in them. "You," she started, but her voice failed. I let the silence stretch, watching her face as the weight of undeniable evidence came crashing down on her. The excuses begin. Emily was smart. She knew there was no way to deny it. So, she did what every cheater does when they get caught. She tried to rewrite history. "I was going to tell you," she whispered, eyes welling with tears. I laughed. A short, bitter sound. "Really? When? After you checked into a hotel with him for the 100th time?" Her lip trembled. "It wasn't." "Don't lie," I snapped. "I know everything. I've been watching. Following. I have proof. So do me a favor, Emily. Tell me the truth. For once." Her breath came out shaky, and I saw it, the gears turning in her head, deciding what version of the story would make her look like the victim. Then she dropped the bomb. "David. I haven't been happy for a long time." I almost laughed again. Of course. There it was. The classic excuse. The deflection. "It wasn't about you," she continued, stepping closer. "It was about me. I felt lost. I felt like I didn't know who I was anymore." I clenched my jaw. "And sleeping with another man helped you find yourself?" She winced. "It wasn't just about that." I stood suddenly, pushing the chair back. She flinched. "Do you love him?" I asked, voice sharp. Emily hesitated. I narrowed my eyes. That pause was all I needed to know. She had thought about it. It wasn't just sex. She had feelings for him. My hands curled into fists, but I forced myself to stay calm. I wasn't going to lose control. Emily finally whispered, "I don't know." That was it. That was the moment our marriage died. I let out a slow exhale, shaking my head. "I did everything for you," I murmured. "I trusted you. I gave you the best years of my life, and this is how you repay me?" She opened her mouth, but I was done listening. I turned away, grabbed my phone, and pulled up my contacts. Her face twisted in confusion. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer. I pressed call. "Hey," I said when the voice answered. "Yeah, I need you to come by." "Bring the papers." Emily stiffened. Her entire body tensed as she realized what I was saying. "David," she said, panic creeping into her voice now. What are you talking about?" I met her eyes. Expression cold. Unforgiving. I'm divorcing you. Her face crumbled. No, David, wait. No, I cut her off. You don't get to beg now. You don't get to cry now. She lunged toward me, grabbing my arms. Please, she choked out. Please, let's talk about this. I shook her off, disgusted. Talk? Like the way you talked to me while you were fucking Mark behind my back? She flinched. She knew she had lost. Tears streamed down her face, but I felt nothing. For the first time in my life, I didn't love her anymore. I turned, walked toward the front door, and opened it. My lawyer was already standing outside. Emily's breath hitched when she saw him. Sign them, I said simply. Or don't. Either way, this is over. She collapsed into sobs, but I didn't care. I walked out, closing the door behind me. As I stepped onto the driveway, I took a deep breath. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. I stood outside my house, breathing in the cold night air. The door was closed behind me, the weight of my decision sinking in. Emily was inside, crying. I should have felt something. Sadness, anger, regret, anything. But I didn't. I felt numb. 12 years of marriage, dissolved in a single conversation. I had just handed her the divorce papers, and by morning, she would wake up in a different world, one where I no longer cared. But was that enough? Could I really walk away just like that? A voice in my head whispered, no. She had destroyed everything we built together. She had lied to my face for over a year, sneaking off to hotels while I stayed home thinking I had a loving wife. She deserved to lose something, too. And suddenly, I knew exactly how to make that happen. The plan begins. I got in my car and pulled out my phone. I had been preparing for this moment for weeks. The files, the videos, the documents, they were all organized, ready to be used. I opened a new message and attached the most damning evidence I had. A video of Emily and Mark entering the Sterling Hotel together. Screenshots of their text messages, including the ones where she called me boring and clueless. A full report from the private investigator, detailing how frequently they met. I scrolled through my contacts. Mark's wife, Jessica Thompson. Emily's parents. Her closest friends. Her boss. I hesitated. This was the nuclear option. Once I hit send, there would be no going back. But then I thought about all the nights I had spent waiting for Emily to come home. The lies. The excuses. The betrayal. I pressed send. The fallout begins. By the time I got home, my phone was blowing up. Jessica, what the hell is this? Call me now. Emily's mom, David, please, tell me this isn't true. Emily's best friend, Claire, oh my God. I can't believe this. I didn't answer any of them. I just sat in my car, watching the messages pour in. Then, my phone rang. Mark Thompson. I let it go to voicemail. Less than a minute later, another call. Emily. I stared at her name on the screen, my heart hammering in my chest. Did I regret it? No. I answered. Her voice was hysterical. David, what the FK did you do? I leaned back in my seat, feeling a calm settle over me. I told the truth, I said simply. She sobbed. You just ruined my life. I almost laughed at that. Oh, your life is ruined? I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Imagine how I felt when I found out my wife was sleeping with another man. David, please, my parents, my job, I'll lose everything. I didn't care. You should have thought about that before you started sneaking into hotel rooms. Silence. For the first time, Emily had nothing to say. She was trapped. You destroyed our marriage, I continued, my voice steady. Now I'm just making sure you can't rewrite history to make yourself the victim. More silence. Then, a whisper. Do you hate me? I thought about it. Did I? No, I admitted. I don't hate you, Emily. I just don't care about you anymore. And with that, I hung up. Mark's world falls apart. By the next morning, Mark's wife had left him. Jessica sent me a final message. Thank you for telling me the truth. I'm done with him. She had already packed her bags, taken their kids, and filed for divorce. Mark tried calling me, but I refused to answer. The last thing I heard, his company was investigating his workplace affair with Emily. He was about to lose his job, too. Good. Emily's breakdown. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I stayed at a friend's place. The next morning, I got a text from Emily's boss. David, I'd like to meet with you regarding some of the information you sent me. I knew what that meant. Emily had mixed business with pleasure, and now she was going to face the consequences. Later that day, she called me again. I let it go to voicemail. When I listened, all I heard was sobbing. David, I lost my job. They fired me. I have nowhere to go. Please, let's talk. I deleted the message. The final goodbye. A few days later, I met Emily for the last time. She looked like a shell of the woman I once loved. Her eyes were swollen. Her hands shook. She had lost everything, her job, her reputation, even the respect of her own parents. I messed up, she whispered. I stayed silent. I didn't think, she choked on her words. I didn't think you'd ever leave me. I met her gaze, my voice calm, steady, final. That was your biggest mistake. And with that, I walked away. For good. It had been a week since I detonated the bomb. A week since I sent the evidence. A week since Emily's world collapsed. And in that time, I had felt nothing. No guilt. No satisfaction. Just emptiness. I wasn't sure if that was normal. If I should have felt relief or rage. But mostly, I just felt done. Until today. Because today was the last time I was ever going to see Emily Holloway. The request. I had ignored most of her texts. At first, they were desperate. David, please, just talk to me. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. Please, let's fix this. We had a life together, David. Don't throw it away. Then, the anger kicked in. You ruined my life. You had no right to do what you did. You're just bitter. You always needed to feel in control. No one will love you the way I did. I had deleted them all. But then, last night, she sent one final message. Can we meet one last time? Please. Just once. No games. No begging. I need to see you. I thought about ignoring it. But something inside me said I should hear her out. Not for her. For me. I needed closure. The meeting. We met at a small cafe on the other side of town. Neutral ground. I arrived first, choosing a seat near the window, watching as cars passed by outside. Then, she walked in. She looked different. Not the confident, put-together woman I had been married to. She looked small, fragile, like someone had stripped away everything she had ever used to protect herself. She sat down across from me, her hands clasped together. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she exhaled. Thank you for coming. I just nodded. She bit her lip, staring at her hands. I don't know how to start this. I stayed silent. She looked up, eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Regret. Her excuses, my reality. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said finally. I won't, I replied. She swallowed hard, nodding. I didn't come here for that. I needed you to know that I'm sorry. I watched her, unmoving. She continued. I didn't set out to hurt you, David. I never wanted to be the woman who cheated. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. That it was just something I needed. I scoffed. Something you needed? She flinched. I don't mean it like that, she whispered. I just. She exhaled sharply, running a hand through her hair. I don't know how to explain it. I felt lost. Stuck. Like my life had already been decided for me. Like I was just existing, not living. I shook my head. And you thought screwing Mark Thompson would fix that? Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't care. I don't know what I thought, she admitted. At first, it was just harmless flirting. And then, one night, I crossed a line. And then I kept crossing it. And every time I told myself I'd stop, I didn't. I clenched my jaw. Because you didn't want to. She didn't deny it. Silence stretched between us. Finally, she whispered, I hate myself for it. I let out a dry laugh. Good. She winced. I lost everything, David. My job. My family. My friends. Even my parents barely speak to me now. I just stared at her. Do you think that makes me feel better? She shook her head quickly. No. No, I'm not saying that to make you feel bad. She took a deep breath. I guess I just wanted you to know that I paid for what I did. I leaned forward, my voice low. No, Emily. You paid for getting caught. Tears slipped down her cheeks. But I didn't feel anything. The final goodbye. I know you'll never take me back, she whispered. I tilted my head. You actually thought that was an option? She closed her eyes. No. But I had to ask. I scoffed. You're not sorry you cheated, Emily. You're sorry you lost your comfortable life. You're sorry you lost control. She didn't answer. Because we both knew it was true. I stood up, tossing a few bills onto the table. This is the last time we'll ever talk, I said. Her breath hitched. David, wait. But I was already walking away. I didn't look back. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I felt free. I walked away from that cafe and never looked back. I thought that would be the end of it. That I could close the door on 12 years of marriage and start fresh. But endings aren't always clean. They don't come wrapped in neat little packages. Because even when you leave someone behind, the ghost of them stays with you. The first few weeks. The first thing I did was move out of our house. I didn't want it. Didn't want to sleep in a bed that had once been ours. Didn't want to sit at the same kitchen table where she used to sip her coffee, scrolling through her phone, probably texting him. So, I found a small apartment on the other side of town. Nothing fancy. Just a place to start over. It was weird, living alone again. At first, I didn't know what to do with myself. The silence felt oppressive, the emptiness of the rooms a constant reminder of everything I had lost. But slowly, I adjusted. I filled my time with work. With the gym. With anything that kept my mind too busy to dwell on the past. But then the nights came. And the nights were the worst. Because at night, there was nothing to distract me. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every moment of our relationship, trying to pinpoint the exact second where everything went wrong. Running into the past. It took 2 months before I saw her again. I was at the grocery store, picking up a few things, when I turned the corner and nearly collided with her. Emily. She looked different. Her eyes were hollow, her shoulders slightly hunched like she had been carrying the weight of her choices for far too long. For a brief second, we just stared at each other. Then she forced a small smile. Hey. I nodded but said nothing. How have you been? She asked, shifting awkwardly. I gave a short laugh. Do you really want me to answer that? She swallowed hard, looking down. I guess not. Silence stretched between us. Then she blurted out, I miss you. I clenched my jaw. Of course she did. She missed the life she threw away. The stability. The security. But she didn't miss me. I exhaled, shaking my head. Emily, you don't get to say that. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't care. She had made her choice. And I had made mine. Without another word, I turned and walked away. Trying to move on. I started dating about 3 months after the divorce papers were finalized. Nothing serious. Just casual dinners. At first, it was strange. I had spent over a decade with one woman, and now I was suddenly sitting across from strangers, trying to make conversation. Some dates went well. Some didn't. But none of them felt real. Because deep down, I wasn't looking for love. I was looking for a distraction. And I knew that wasn't fair to them or to me. The unexpected visitor. It had been 6 months since the divorce when I heard a knock on my apartment door late one night. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, I felt my stomach drop. Emily. She looked even worse than before. Her eyes were bloodshot, her hair a mess. She was holding a bottle of wine in one hand, a half-hearted smile on her lips. Hey, she murmured. I sighed. Emily, what are you doing here? She shrugged. I don't know. I was thinking about you. About us. I clenched my jaw. There is no us anymore. She swallowed. Can I come in? I hesitated. Every part of me was screaming no. But some part of me, some deep, pathetic part, wanted to hear what she had to say. So, I stepped aside. The final temptation. She sat on my couch, fidgeting with the bottle of wine. I was hoping we could talk, she said. I crossed my arms. About what? She bit her lip. About us. I exhaled sharply. Emily, we've had this conversation. You cheated. You destroyed our marriage. What else is there to say? She hesitated. Then, so softly I almost didn't hear it, she whispered. I still love you. I stiffened. For a moment, I just stared at her. Then I laughed. A bitter, empty laugh. You love me? I repeated. You sure as hell didn't love me when you were sleeping with Mark Thompson. She flinched. David, please. No, I cut her off. You don't get to do this. She wiped at her eyes. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know why I shook my head. You don't know? You spent a year making that choice, Emily. This wasn't some mistake. It was deliberate. Every text. Every hotel. Every lie. She broke down, sobbing. But I felt nothing. I just want to go back, she choked out. I want to fix things. I sighed. That's the problem, Emily. You think this is fixable. But it's not. She looked up at me, desperate. Can we at least try? I leaned in, my voice cold and final. No. Her face crumbled. And for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. A new beginning. Emily left that night. And I knew, deep in my bones, that was the last time I would ever see her. For the first time since my world fell apart, I felt like I was finally free. I wasn't looking for revenge anymore. I wasn't looking for closure. I was just moving forward. And that was the greatest revenge of all. Living well. Without her.